Technical hiccup. That was actually my fault. That's not the. Without having a mixer channel, you may need to consider switching to what the fuck is that? I don't know what that is. With FTL, looks like you're streaming with FTL without having mixer channel. I don't know what the fuck that means. Restream FTL. Faster than light. Streaming protocol fully supported. Blah, 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 blah. This might be just something they're trying to charge me for. So this is all fine. So we're now actually, I think, live on both YouTube and Twitch. So I apologize for the hiccup. So that cost us about 20 minutes. So sorry about that. So like I said, new at this. This is the third one of these. So that it's not working completely seamlessly is my fault more than anything else. So welcome aboard. So let's just make sure that everything is cool. What it is I had set up a different profile in OBS for managing videos that I'm recording as opposed to streaming. And that's the thing I was on. And I hit streaming and we were live on Twitch and nothing else was working. So, whoops. Anyway, so welcome anybody that pops in for the chat. So technical issues, my fault. Sorry about that. Things are going on. There was actually like 20 minutes of me talking on Twitch. If anybody's tuning in with YouTube, this is why. We're just popping in right now. So we'll mention one thing, which is that I have downscaled the stream to be 720 and 30 frames per second at viewer suggestions. Thanks very much for that, because hopefully those who are viewing on Twitch will get substantially better quality video, even if it's lower resolution. I mean, just looking at me anyway, it's not a big deal. Were I streaming a game, I would feel obliged to film at 1080. Even if it was still only 30 frames per second, should be fine. So anyway, hopefully everybody's doing okay. I'm doing fine. Everything's fine. I mentioned also a little while ago, we're going to try filming with this in like the next hour. New phone. I always use my phone for video, so we'll see how it works. It's a Samsung Galaxy 10. Not the 10 Plus or the 10e or the 10 Plus, blah, 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 whatever else other models they have that I don't care about. So reviewing quickly for those who are just tuning in, Tuesday game Beyond the Rhine, still going. Didn't make it last week because of work, but it happens. Wednesday game, 3 Days of Gettysburg from GMT, designer Richard Berg. We have called that in favor of the Confederacy. In the night of July 1st, General Meade has decided he is going to pull out. So we have pulled that down and set up the Korean War from Victory Games, which is neat so far. Thursday game is Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2, which I haven't been at in like 2 months, so because of work. So probably more than 2 months actually. So hopefully we'll get back to that this week too. So our topic for tonight, which thankfully I didn't get into the week's topic. There will, by the way, anybody that didn't catch this, I'm going to mention it again. There will be a Twitter poll this week on my Twitter channel. I have not still figured out how to like put links and stuff into Twitch. I should really get on that. But they're in the video notes on YouTube for my Twitter feed, or you could just search Twitter for Ardwulf. That you'll find me. I'm also Ardwulf on Steam, by the way. If anybody wants to look me up on there, that would be totally fine. There will be a Twitter poll this week to see if we can get some interesting topics for this week, for next week, that is. We're going to keep doing this. Last week's stream was, I thought, very successful for like the second time I've done it. Like there's literally 2 videos in the channel's history. I have done some very tentative steps into streaming before. I tried to stream Elder Scrolls Online, and the video was total garbage, so I didn't even save it. I just pulled it right down. So otherwise, let's get into the topic for the week, which is OCS versus Europa. Now, I feel like, and I think this probably is easier to see in the early versions of OCS. And let me talk briefly about my history with OCS. I had a couple of the Europa games back in the day. Off the top of my head, I had Narvik, had Fire in the East, and had Case White. And I think that was it. And I also had a couple of the really early OCS games. But I never played either Europa or OCS back in the day. I had Enemy at the Gates, and I want to say I had the first Guderian's Blitzkrieg. But I had two, and I had DAC, the first DAC. And I never played any of those. And I just didn't... The people I was wargaming with at the time just weren't into OCS. They were into ASL and a variety of other things, but not OCS. So, and that was kind of before the heyday of OCS, where OCS really kind of matured over the years to become kind of a marquee game, especially for people that want to play big games. So it was therefore something of a surprise to me when, after having played just a little bit of OCS in an experimental way on my own, to go through the OCS rules again and read and really feel like Dean had designed the game as an answer to Europa. Now, I've talked to some people about this too, that seems to corroborate that basic idea, that Dean had issues with the way Europa played and flowed, and OCS was kind of an attempt at more or less the same unit scale, but not the same map scale as we discussed last week, to address the issues that he had with Europa. And I gotta say, my issues with Europa are not identical to those issues, I think, but are somewhat parallel to those issues. But fundamentally, I think the problem, so we're clear, apparently some people didn't get the message last week that I did compliment Europa on a couple of things. For one thing, it has excellent order of battle research. That's absolutely true. It is just the order of battle research for a different game than is the game that comes in the box. It's order of battle research for OCS, essentially, for a game at the scale of OCS. The primary issue, there are some mechanical sub-optimizations in Europa in terms of the way stacking works, the way armor works, and certainly in terms of the way... And actually, I'll agree with the comment that said that the air system in Europa is excellent. I like the air system in Europa, but there's just too much of it. There's too many units. Now, but the problem is not fundamentally that there's too many units. It's that the scale is wrong for the maps that come with the game. The map scale is simply off when you line it up with the unit scale, where necessitating things like massive stacking limits and massive quantities of air. Now, the fact is that if at 16 miles to the hex, right? So, and I'm going to speak with this. For many people, Europa is synonymous with the big East Front. Europa fire in the East scorched earth, and that's fine. And I have reasons to think that Europa would work better on the East Front than it would on the West Front because, there's less air, there's no naval to speak of, and it's very much a ground war. But you still have all those issues that I discussed last week. So I'm going to compare Europa West Front to OCS West Front because I'm playing Beyond the Rhine right now. I've also played Sicily 2 more than once. I've played Sicily 1, actually, which is a neat game, but at a different scale than the current OCS West Front product line. But so the hex scale in Europa is 16 miles to the hex. The hex scale in West Front OCS is 3.5 miles to the hex. So if you picture a sort of hex, 5 smaller hexes in across, then you will have an idea of what the scale difference is on the map, whereas the unit scale is approximately the same. Now, there's more units in Europa because of the in-depth order of battle research. They uncovered a lot of unit dispositions and orders and stuff like that said, okay, this platoon of guard, probably not platoons. There are platoon level units, but not many of them. But this company of troops was stationed apart from its parent unit for a month or something like that. So they give you a separate counter for that. OCS does less of that, but still fundamentally the top tier units are divisions, and you can break the divisions down, but the only units that are true divisions are infantry divisions and armored divisions for the most part. And every other type of unit has its own counter. And that's basically true in both systems. But if you can imagine that 5 hex diameter hex, imagine stacking all of the units in that hex into one Europa hex, and therein is the problem. It's simply a scale issue, and I really feel like that's something that they couldn't really fix because it was set in stone back in 1972 or 1973 with Dragonlock Austin. That's the scale it's at. That's hard to fix, and I think it is. They made that decision out of inexperience at the time. I think it was a suboptimal choice, and again. That's not to say that you can't have fun playing Europa. I actually had fun playing Europa, and I felt like it was a very valuable learning experience as a wargamer to have played Europa. But despite that, I feel like the game system is just more trouble than it's worth. More trouble basically on all levels, in terms of rules, in terms of how hard it is to get the games. It's more trouble than it's worth. If you are interested in big East Front or West Front games, there are definitely alternatives. OCS is only one of those. Particularly on the East Front, there are a plethora of big East Front game alternatives. Off the top of my head, as I mentioned last week, you got OCS, you got the GMT East Front series, which is almost the exact same scale as OCS. And which I've never played, but I've owned a couple of them at various times, and it looks like an interesting system, and I think it would be worthwhile to try it someday. You have newly re-released from GMT The Dark Valley. Also coming up from Lock and Load Publishing is the new version of Trial of Strength, which is a classic East Front game originally from Panther Games, and they're redoing it, and it seems like it's the same people doing it for Lock and Load. There is. I'll try to put this in the video description on YouTube. There's a preview video of this of one of the proof copies or playtest copies. It looks nice, and I'm not a big buyer of Lock and Load's stuff. Not because I don't think they do good stuff. Actually, I have liked a couple of the things that they do. But because a lot of the stuff they do is at the tactical level, and I feel that I already have enough answers at the tactical level, particularly for World War II. I mean, I have ASL. I have ASL starter kit. That is a very crowded corner of the wargaming hobby, and therefore I don't have really room to fit in another World War II squad level tactical game. I will say that I was in search of sort of a lighter alternative to ASL for a while, and so I tried out a bunch of different things. I tried out Company of Heroes. I tried out Panzer Grenadier, which is platoon level. I tried out 3 or 4 other things, and the one that I liked the best was Lock and Load Tactical for World War II. It's actually quite a nice game. They have a big rule book you can download now. The products are nice. I could say stuff about the graphics, but I have a relatively high opinion of Lock and Load Publishing. It's just that they don't do that much that I'm interested in. But Trial of Strength is one that I'm interested in. I'm very interested in that. I had that back in the day. It's another one I never played. It was recommended to me as probably the best East Front World War II game at that particular scale, and it was at the time it was a 2-map game. Whether that will be 2 maps or 4, or I don't know how Lock and Load's going to do it in terms of logistically what components you get in the box. But that's something that I'm looking forward to. I think they're going to kickstart it, and that ought to start sometime soon. I will also point out, here's where we get into our role-playing discussion. I need to get back to OCS versus Europa, though. But since we're on the subject of Kickstarter, let me bust in with, right now, I think starting a couple of days ago, there is a Traveller 5th edition Kickstarter going from Far Future Enterprises, which is Mark Miller, the original designer. So I'm going to talk about Traveller 5th edition, and it's going to be a little bit of a rant. I don't own the 5th edition of Traveller. Okay, now I'm talking about the one that's called Traveller 5. Which edition is actually the 5th edition? We could talk about. There could be a whole show just on that. If you want to see that show, please let me know. But Traveller 5 is a fucking embarrassment. It is essentially a giant phone book-sized hardcover book of notes on a role-playing game. There's no actual role-playing game in it. The new Kickstarter is for a very handsome 3-volume slipcase set of the Traveller 5 rules. I have no assurances that this thing has been revised or worked on or evolved into an actual RPG at all. Now, there's some interesting things in it. There's certainly things that if you're a Traveller person and you're trying to put a Traveller thing together, you could get things out of it. There's some interesting stuff in there, but there's no game there. There's nobody's playing that. I don't know if Mark's playing that, but I doubt it very seriously, just looking at the book. I'm tempted by the Kickstarter anyway because I've got a big Traveller collection and I love Traveller, and God bless you, Mark, but really, I'm not sure you're really doing the right thing here. It's $100 for the slipcase set. Considering what I just paid for this new phone, maybe I'm not going to get in on the Kickstarter, but there's about 25 days left to go, too, so there's that. Let me just check on stream health here real quick. We should be fine. We are fine. Okay, good. So, again, because we screwed up the thing with YouTube, we're using Restream.io to stream on both Twitch and YouTube. And last week it worked perfectly because I didn't fuck it up. This week I fucked it up. So, sorry about that. We'll have some extra stuff. I'm actually also thinking about doing additional streaming. Of something. That something might be video games, but I don't necessarily have good upstream bandwidth, which is something you kind of want for video games. But there are certainly video games that would be fine without really responsive upstream bandwidth. And I'm thinking specifically of the Paradox games. So if you want to see that kind of thing, please let me know. If you want to see some particular video game, by all means. There is a... By the way, I do, if anybody doesn't know, I do have a separate... I have 2 YouTube channels. I have Ardwulf's Lair, which is where most viewers are probably coming from. And I have Ardwulf Digital, which is the video game channel, which has not been at any point, very active. So, we'll see. But I'm talking about on Twitch now. And I could stream to YouTube as well. Why not? If anybody wants to see that, please, make suggestions. That would be totally fine. So OCS versus Europa. I've already talked about I think the most fundamental difference between the two games in terms of overall high level details is the scale difference. The scale difference is massive, and I think it really is the hinge on which I come to the decision that I think OCS works a lot better than Europa does. Now, Europa also has a more sophisticated than average for its era supply system, but it's not really comparable to OCS in any meaningful way. You do have a number of REs that you can supply based on what you have on the map. So, for example, in Second Front, it was dependent on the number of ports that the Allies controlled determined the number of REs they could supply, on the continent. But you're not tracking supply points on the map or anything like that with OCS, which is, in a way, a lot of people find the supply management part of OCS to be fussy and intimidating. But in practice, it works pretty well. Now, do I think there could be simplifications? Well, sure, you'd end up with a different game. There's somebody floating around somewhere that's talking about basically playing OCS and dropping supply points completely and just using trace supply, which is fine, but you're going to get a very un-OCS-like experience out of that, and it is almost certainly going to destroy the balance of whatever game it is that you're playing. OCS, if you don't know, is kind of infamous for its supply and logistics system, where you have trace supply, which works more or less like you would expect it to work. You trace to an HQ, which traces to a detrainable hex. And it has supply points that you have to spend to either attack with anything or to move with anything that is mechanized. And there's more to it than that. And if, by the way, if somebody wants to see like an OCS video on this, I'm pretty well. I kind of want to get back to playing it for a few weeks, but I'm kind of in a good position to do OCS instructional stuff. And I don't really feel like there's a lot of good OCS instructional videos on YouTube. which is one of my motivations for finishing the Paths of Glory series, so I can move on to something else, which may or may not be OCS, but I think there's an opening there for OCS. I think there's a market, if you will, for somebody doing OCS instructional stuff. There's a decent amount of playthrough content. There's a decent amount of after-action report type stuff, but there's not really like a methodical walkthrough of the rules, which doesn't necessarily... A lot of the OCS rules are really simple and straightforward. It is the supply system that makes OCS difficult to play. Not necessarily in a sense of mechanical overhead, but in the sense of, in order to play it competently, you need to have a certain level of mastery of that supply system, or you will shit the bed. So Europa lacks that aspect, okay? And I'm going to circle back to the fundamental difference in map scale, because that is, I think, the killer. In order to make that work, that unit scale along with that map scale, what was required was massive stacking limits, okay? To get something that looks like historical frontage, they had to. That's why the Order of Battles stuff is so detailed, is because they had to do that way. And that's also, I think, fundamentally why, although I think there were an enormous number of simpler approaches, say the armor rule, where you have to calculate 1/7 increments of armor, and I believe it's 1/7 of the REs, not 1/7 of the factors. But also some units are neutral, so some units don't count as either armor or not armor for that calculation. It's a pain in the ass. I can think of, for the simulation value that provides, I can think of at least half a dozen alternative mechanical approaches that would be far simpler. If you have over half armor, you get a column shift, or 2 column shifts, or a +2, or whatever. That would basically do the same thing. And I mean, it could be a little more detailed than that, but not have you actually calculating what, is this 1/7 of my total stuff. But that distinction would become relatively meaningless if you had fewer units in the hex in the first place. But again, you have no motivation to stack at anything less than the maximum stacking in Europa. And in OCS you do. That particular incentive is barrage. Particularly if it is a unit on the front that is adjacent to an enemy unit that can spot for it. If you are over 6 regimental equivalents in that hex, then you have like +3 or 4 columns against you on the barrage table if you get barraged. That is going to result in step losses basically almost every time. That's a huge modifier on that barrage table. So in very seldom in OCS will we have big stacks on the front line. We will instead have big stacks behind the front line, often in reserve, which is, I think, a better reflection of the actual things that happened in the period. Yeah, you want some stout guys on the front line, but you don't necessarily need 3 divisions stacked in every hex. Which in Europa, you were disadvantaged if you didn't. Now, I also make no particular claims to competency at Europa either. I mean, I still consider myself kind of a noob at OCS. I'm not pretending that I was very good at Europa either, but I had relatively little motivation to try and master the rules of that system. When I knew playing it, it's like, I'm having fun, but after we're done with this, I'm not going to want to touch this system again. At least on anything like the second front level, and that does include the East Front stuff too. I just wouldn't want to deal with that game system again. We could easily, I could easily see doing, again, the smaller games, the Balkan campaign, even the North Africa campaign, which just wouldn't be that small, but in terms of unit density, it would be relatively small. I wouldn't have a problem with trying something like that, but that wouldn't take us like 14 months to play through, which Second Front did. And we were just ready, more than one of us, were ready to be finished with Europa for the next decade. And I am fine with that. There are definitely some interesting things about Europa as a product line and as a game system. It definitely does have strong points. And I felt like I went on kind of a rant last stream about it. But at the same time, I think there are other game systems that basically cover the same ground at a similar scale, with much greater mechanical elegance, much greater ability to produce historical-looking results. So, I mean, not that we had... I mean, it all kind of does come out in the wash, and you get something that's relatively historical at the end of Europa. I don't really have an issue with that. But I felt like we had to behave in a pretty ahistorical way to make that happen. And there are certainly examples where OCS, that I could contrive that would result in OCS behaving the same way, and actually Beyond the Rhine is one of them. There's no incentive, for example, to launch Operation Market Garden. Now, should Operation Market Garden almost certainly fail? Yes. Should it be very difficult to pull off successfully? Yes. But it is very, very difficult to even put yourself in a situation where you could do it in Beyond the Rhine. I felt like this really only applies to the first couple of turns. I mean, maybe if if Beyond the Rhine started 3 or 4 turns later, kind of when Market Garden fizzled, I wonder if there's a scenario for that, actually. I should check, because I think that would actually be totally doable. But the things that happened historically in the campaign, Market Garden fizzles, but it happens. Antwerp does fall. Those things are very difficult to pull off in Beyond the Rhine. And that's, I felt like an issue. So there's all that. So, I don't know how many... We had our problem. So it looks like we do have some people. Stream Vassal playing OCS. Commander Solo 193, thanks for stopping by. That is absolutely a possibility. Whether that turns out to be a stream or a video, I don't know. But that is absolutely a strong possibility, actually. And in that sense, it might be better off to do it as a live stream. I'll be honest, and there's some other folks that have been honest about this and talked about it. There's a tremendous advantage, live streaming versus recorded video. Live streaming, you don't have to edit. You can go take clips out of it later and put it together, but you don't have to. So live streaming OCS is a strong possibility, actually. Now, I think any major playthrough project, a little froggy here, sorry, is going to have to wait till after Origins, which is in 4 weeks. I think it's about 4 weeks. But that is a very strong possibility. And bluntly, the top video priority for this month is Paths of Glory Part 4. So there's going to be a Part 5 and a Part 6 too. Not sure how much more time I will need than that. I was going to close the whole thing off with like a playthrough turn, which I still might do. But it kind of depends. I need at least 2 episodes after Part 5, and it just depends how much runtime is needed for Part 5, particularly. And I also wanted to do an episode on certain card event chains, specifically the Russian Revolution event chain and the U.S. entry event chain. Neither one of which are guaranteed to go off in any given game of Paths of Glory, and I think that's by design. And it's very possible to see neither event in a game of Paths of Glory. But then again, you know, I've been thinking about picking up the new version of it. I don't need it. That's the thing. But it really is. I'm reluctant to use the word classic because I'm not convinced it's quite old enough. But it's kind of a classic. If there were a classic... No, I think that's fair. Actually, GMT's actually been around for a long time. And Paths of Glory is not that old. But there are games from GMT that I think are classics. Off the top of my head... I take it back. You can't see any of them on the shelf behind me, I don't think. I think you have some games there that are future classics. One of them is... I always have trouble with this. That game, Unconditional Surrender by Salvasta. That is a fantastic game. Somehow I've managed to misplaced my dice for it. So I have to put those back in the box. Well, not half, but a big box of my games are at my buddy's place because we were talking about what we were doing, and we had maps laid out for about 10 different games. The things that we talked about was TCS, the Tactical Combat Series from the Gamers and Multi-Man Publishing. We were in very serious consideration of doing the old Omaha game of that. And it turns out that the map layout is a little bit weird, so we couldn't quite fit it comfortably. That doesn't necessarily mean it's off the table. I've always wanted to play TCS. It's another one of those things where I had a couple of them way back in the day. I think I had GD40 offhand. And I might have had another one too. And I never tried it. I'd like to try it again. The new one is on pre-order on Multiman's website right now. I believe it's some engagement in North Africa that I don't know a ton about. And I want to say it's between the British and the Italians. And it's one of those rare situations in which the Italians put up a pretty staunch fight. Then again, it's relatively early in that campaign too. So, what else did we consider? We considered War Between the States. This was the revised version from Decision. It certainly looks okay. It's a 3-map game, pretty big. Not super excited about it because I have this, the U.S. Civil War, which is, I think, kind of where I need to be on Civil War games that are more wargamey than, say, For the People, which is a fabulous game, by the way. But it's not Hex Encounter, and I like Hex Encounter. So if I have a Hex Encounter game, a lot of people will point to the old Victory Games Civil War as the game, that the Hex Encounter strategic level Civil War game. And they have excellent reasons for feeling that way. U.S. Civil War, another Mark Simonich design. I tend to like Mark Simonich's designs. Is kind of a natural evolution of the Victory Games U.S. Civil War, which I've never played, but I've looked at, and I've talked to a lot of people about in the last couple of years, because it has become known as kind of a classic from Victory Games. It's one of those things, it's a funny thing, because back in the early 90s, when I got into wargaming kind of for the second time, the people I was playing with were really uninterested in anything from Victory Games. It was simply, they had a low opinion of their games. Nobody really wanted to play any of those. And now a lot of those, so I had kind of and I never played any of them, except for Cold War, which I think was fairly lousy, but I think that was actually lousy. I don't think that was just a perception at the time. But the rest of it, I think, was just perception at the time. And now I see and hear people talking about how fondly they remember the various things from Victory Games. The only things I have now from Victory are Vietnam, which I just got like a fabulous deal on eBay for an unpunched copy, where like 3 counters have fallen out of the sheet, but they're in there. Of Victory Games Vietnam, I got it for $20 on eBay. Bing! That was a good buy. And I have 1809, which is Napoleon's Danube campaign in 1809, which is Kevin Zucker design. That looks interesting too. And now we're playing Joe Balkowski's Korea game, and I think it's quite a strong game. I don't know how many Korean war games that cover it at that scale. You don't want to say the whole thing, because no game covers the whole thing, because a lot of the whole thing was stalemate. But the critical period, 50 to 53 or whatever it was. I don't know how many Hex Encounter games there are that cover that. I mean, you have East Holdfast Korea, and I've heard good things about that series. I haven't played it. It's like a block series. It's probably fine. I don't know. You have OCS Korea, which is a big 3-map game, and that could potentially be pretty interesting. Actually, I wouldn't mind investigating that at all. I would like to welcome everybody in the chat. We do have some viewers now. I'm happy to have you here. We had some technical issues earlier, which included me getting a phone call from my wife who went to get food, and which was unexpected. I'm like, I'm streaming now, honey. I need you to not call me now. Thank you. Click. And I was like on the wrong profile in OBS, so I was not streaming to both channels, and it was live on Twitch but not on YouTube, and it was a big fuck up. So my fault, my bad. New with this, sorry. Anyway, I would like to thank everybody for stopping by. There will be a Twitter poll for looking for topics for next week. We've kind of already covered the OCS versus Korea thing to the extent that I'm prepared to talk about it in like a casual sit-down type of format today. I certainly think there's room for a detailed analysis of that. But I don't, at this point, with 9 or 10 months distance from Europa, I don't feel quite qualified to make that video personally. But I feel perfectly qualified to shoot my mouth off on the subject, so there you go. But that is the price of your ticket. That's why you're here, right? And Lord knows I love to hear myself talk, so that's all fine. So we're gonna get back to, and I need another video for the week. There's this video. There's the unboxing that you'll see on Tuesday. There's going to be another video on Thursday or Friday, and then we'll be back to this on Sunday. So anybody wants to see anything, the stream recording will be up on Twitch, but it will go away eventually, and then the actual recording will be on YouTube basically forever until YouTube goes out of business, whenever that is. So I'm going to make, I guess I make just loose talks till the end here. I watched about half, maybe a little less than half, of Ready Player One, the Steven Spielberg film. I haven't read the book. I hear the book's good, but the movie's pretty fucking annoying. Okay, it's like we're going to put all these shout-outs to pop culture, and then we're going to explain everyone in dialogue. So the main character, snaps his car into existence, and of course it's the DeLorean from Back to the Future. And somebody runs up and said, "Ooh, it's the DeLorean from Back to the Future." I'm like, seriously? You're gonna tell me all this? There's like the one character's building a replica of the Iron Giant in his workshop, and they say, "You're building a replica of the Iron Giant in your workshop?" It is stilted as hell, and I was like, man, this is irritating. I want to punch my screen. This is so irritating. Now, on the other hand, they like actually step the digital characters into the Overlook Hotel from The Shining, and that's actually neat, because then they could get away with it being, they say, "Oh, it's the Overlook Hotel from The Shining," but then there's like an extended sequence in there that actually is neat and does kind of work. So, by all means, watch it. It's on HBO right now. But I'm going to try to finish it, but man, I was bugged by what of it I saw. But maybe it gets past that. That would be great. All right, so I want to thank everybody for watching. Now, of course, we got a bunch of people coming up. I've thought about streaming again later today, actually, because I have ample time today. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, you'll be able to watch the replay of the streams whenever it goes live on YouTube and Twitch. I thank everybody for putting up with. Fortunately, I think before all the folks showed up was when we had the technical problems at the beginning. So thanks for coming. I would like to wish everybody a warm and fuzzy week. And I'm not really sure I get the whole subscribe on Twitch thing. I think you got to pay for that. And it's like $5 a month per subscription, which is awesome. But Padraig Burke. How about I call you Burke? I've never been 100% convinced I understand how to pronounce that name when it is spelled that way. But thanks for stopping by. And I want to thank everybody again. And y'all have a good week. I hate saying y'all. But it is really a useful contraction. I want to stop. I should stop doing that now. So again, everybody have a great week, and I will see you next week, same time, same channel, and hopefully we will not have a catastrophic technical fuck up. That would be cool.